Welcome to Conspiracist. Today, for your deep dive, we're looking into something pretty fascinating. The idea that governments have actively hidden evidence of the hollow earth theory.
It's a persistent idea, definitely.
Yeah, so we'll be digging into, historical accounts, what science says, and some of the legends surrounding this whole hollow earth concept.
Right. Lots of different threads to pull on.
Exactly. Our goal here is really to evaluate the evidence objectively, looking at the reasons people give for believing there's been a cover-up based on the sources provided.
Okay, so where do we start? The origins.
Let's do that. Where does this more modern idea really kick off?
Well, one interesting starting point mentioned in the sources is Louis Jacoliot's book from 1873, Le Sou du Dieu. He talks about Asgartha, describing it as this ancient destroyed city. He claimed it was the capital of India way, way back, predating known history.
Asgartha. Sounds a bit like Asgard from Norse mythology.
It does, yeah. That connection is often noticed. So you see this idea of a lost, maybe advanced civilization, potentially underground or hidden.
Okay, so that's one early mention, and then...
Then you have Alexandre Saint-Yves Delvedre. His version of the Agartha myth became, well, really influential. He expanded on it quite a bit.
Right, Agartha, that name pops up a lot.
It does. And in these later stories, Agartha starts getting linked to other mythical underground places, like the Buddhist kingdom of Shambhala.
Oh, interesting. So multiple hidden kingdoms.
Sometimes seen as connected, sometimes even as rivals, particularly in, certain occult writings.
Huh. So what are we really looking at with these early Agartha stories? Myth, history.
Well, John Michael Greer described Agartha as a rich fabric of legend. He suggested it was kind of woven together from bits of Victorian anthropology, occult politics, and, well, maybe some imagination.
Thin air, I think, was the phrase.
That's the one. Basically interpreting old myths through a modern, sometimes, let's say, creative lens, often using ideas that science later moved past.
Got it. So a mix of old legends and newer interpretations. But weren't there also some early scientific ideas about a hollow earth? Seems counterintuitive now.
Oh, absolutely. Back in the 17th century, you had Edmund Halley.
Yeah.
Yes, the comic guy. He actually proposed that the Earth was made of, like, concentric spheres, shells within shells with atmospheres between them, and a glowing, inhabited center.
Wow. Halley. And inhabited.
Yeah. He even thought the aurora borealis, the northern lights, might be gases escaping from this inner world through openings at the poles.
That's quite a theory. So even mainstream science was exploring really unusual ideas back then.
They were trying to explain things they didn't fully understand yet. Then later, early 19th century, there was John Cleves Sims. He was a huge promoter of the concentric spheres idea, and especially the idea of big holes in the North and South poles.
The Sims holes, right.
Exactly. He was incredibly passionate about it. His son even put up a monument asking for an expedition to find these polar openings. It's actually shaped like a hollow earth.
A monument. That's dedication. And didn't Sims or someone using his ideas write a novel about it?
Yeah. The source material mentions Simsonia, Voyage of Discovery from 1820, by a Captain Adam Seaborn. Most people think Seaborn was actually a pseudonym for Sims himself. It's basically one of the first fictional trips into a hollow earth.
Okay, so we've got myths, legends, early scientific speculation, even fiction, all building this idea. But then it takes a darker turn, doesn't it? The Nazi connection.
Ah, yes. That's where a lot of the modern conspiracy thinking really seems to focus, based on the sources.
The idea of a secret Nazi base in Antarctica, maybe Hitler escaping there, how plausible is that, based on what we know?
Well, the sources mention claims of German U-boats heading to Antarctica late in the war. But, I mean, you have to consider the reality of submarines back then.
The technology wasn't quite there.
Right. Operating under thick ice for long periods. Air supply was a huge issue. The pressure, navigation. It would have been incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for the subs they had.
So the basic logistics are a major hurdle for that theory.
A very big one. Then, after the war, especially in the 1950s, you start hearing rumors about Nazi flying saucers hidden down there.
Linked to their Wunderwaffen, the Wonder Weapons program.
Exactly. That whole narrative of secret, super advanced Nazi tech kind of fed into these Antarctic base theories.
And some claims even connect this to Admiral Byrd's expeditions, saying his planes were attacked.
Yeah, there are stories that Byrd lost planes during Operation High Jump because of attacks by advanced Nazi craft. But the documented evidence points to things like, well, a crash caused by a whiteout. Dangerous conditions, basically.
Not hostile action from hidden Nazi UFOs.
The evidence doesn't support that, no. It seems more like the idea of Nazi secret weapons got attached to the Antarctic mystery and the Hollow Earth idea.
Okay, let's focus on Admiral Byrd himself then. He's a really central figure in a lot of these Hollow Earth claims.
He absolutely is. Richard Byrd, famous polar explorer, aviation pioneer, very well-respected figure. But the Hollow Earth narrative often brings up these supposed secret lost diaries of his. Books by people like Timothy Green Beckley or Jeff Douglas claim to publish them.
Diaries detailing trips inside the Earth.
Supposedly, yes.
Yeah.
First-hand accounts of meeting people or seeing amazing things inside.
Well, what about the authenticity of these diaries? You mentioned something interesting about them earlier.
Right. The sources point out that when you look at these diaries, published in different books by different authors, they often contain identical prints of the diary pages.
Identical, not just the same text, but the same actual images of the pages.
Exactly, which, raises big questions. It suggests they're likely copying from one common, possibly fabricated source rather than multiple independent discoveries of a real diary.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good for authenticity. What about that quote often attributed to Byrd? Something about the great unknown beyond the pole?
Ah, yes, the 1947 quote. I'd like to see that land beyond the pole. That area beyond the pole is the center of the great unknown.
Hollow Earthers see that as proof, right? He's talking about the entrance.
That's the interpretation, yes. They see it as a kind of coded message. But, looking at it in context, Antarctica was still largely unexplored. He was an explorer. It seems much more likely he was just talking about, the vast uncharted territory of the Antarctic continent itself.
The straightforward explanation seems more plausible given his job.
It does. Now, the stories get even wilder. Some sources mention claims Byrd met advanced beings or saw UFOs marked with swastikas inside the Earth.
Whoa, okay. Where do those claims come from?
Often attributed to those same secret journals or sometimes vague references to, like, suppressed Soviet intelligence reports. There are dramatic tales of a whole U.S. Navy fleet being attacked during Operation High Jump.
But again, lacking solid proof.
Lacking credible evidence, yes. These accounts often include details like Byrd finding a lush, warm area inside an opening at the pole, and even claims of a video existing that proves his flight. But it was supposedly suppressed.
The classic suppressed evidence trope.
It's very common in these kinds of narratives. It's also worth remembering, as the source material notes, that Byrd's own grandson, Robert Byrd Pryor, apparently viewed the Hollow Earth connection with, let's say, extreme skepticism. Called for 5 pounds of salt.
Right. So quite a contrast between the conspiracy claims and the family's perspective. Okay, we've got these stories, the alleged diaries, the interpretations. What does established science say about the possibility of a hollow Earth?
Well, the scientific consensus, based on multiple lines of evidence discussed in the sources, is pretty clear. The Earth isn't hollow.
And the main reason is?
Density, primarily. We know the Earth's mass and volume, so we can calculate its average density. And that density is much higher than the density of the rocks we find on the surface.
Meaning there has to be much heavier stuff deeper down.
Exactly. If there were huge hollow spaces, the planet's overall density just wouldn't be that high. Gravity itself requires a dense core and mantle for a planet of our size.
Makes sense. What else?
Seismic waves. Earthquakes generate waves that travel through the Earth. By studying how these waves travel, how fast they go, where they bend, where they get blocked, seismologists can map out the interior.
Like an ultrasound for the planet.
That's a great analogy, yeah. And these waves clearly show distinct layers. The solid crust, the semi-solid mantle, the liquid outer core, and the solid inner core. They don't show evidence of massive empty voids.
So if there were huge caves, the waves would behave differently.
Oh, definitely. They'd stop or reflect unexpectedly, creating shadow zones where we wouldn't detect them. We just don't see that on the scale required for a hollow Earth.
Okay. What about the conditions deep inside the Earth? Pressure, heat?
Immense. The pressure and temperature deep down are so high that rock doesn't behave like rock does on the surface. It becomes plastic that flows slowly, kind of like very, very thick putty or toothpaste, as you said earlier.
So a giant stable cave couldn't even form.
It's geologically impossible on that scale. Any large void would simply collapse under the immense pressure. Plus, we know it gets incredibly hot the deeper you go. Think about deep mines or drilling projects. It's not a cool, habitable environment deep down.
Right. The sources also mentioned the Schiehallion experiment. How does that fit in?
Ah, that was an 18th century experiment in Scotland. They tried to measure the Earth's density by seeing how much a mountain's gravity deflected a pendulum. While it was an early attempt, its results, and later, more precise measurements of gravity, are consistent with a dense Earth. not one with huge empty spaces that would reduce its overall mass and gravitational pull.
So physics, geology, seismology, they all point away from a hollow structure.
Pretty consistently, yes. Although it's worth noting the sources mention variations, like the concave hollow Earth idea.
Oh yeah, Cyrus Teed and the Koreshan Unity, what was that about?
Their idea, sometimes called sky-centrism, was that we actually live on the inside surface of a hollow sphere, and the sun, stars, everything are in the middle.
So the whole universe is inside the Earth.
Basically, yeah. A complete inversion of the standard model. They even claim they did experiments to prove it, though. Needless to say, mainstream science doesn't support that model at all.
Wow. That's a whole other level. Okay, let's shift back to the more standard hollow Earth idea. How much has fiction and legend played a role in keeping it alive?
A huge role. We mentioned to Gartha earlier that legendary underground kingdom is a powerful archetype. It appears again and again in esoteric writings and fiction. The idea of a hidden world, maybe with advanced knowledge or beings, is just compelling.
It taps into that sense of mystery, something hidden just beyond our reach.
Definitely. And in terms of fiction making it popular, you can't really overstate the influence of Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth.
A classic.
Absolutely. Published in 1864, it took the scientific ideas at the time, some real, some speculative, and wove them into this incredible adventure. It made the idea of a world inside our own seem plausible, or at least fantastically exciting, to generations of readers.
He made it feel almost real by grounding it in contemporary science, didn't he?
He did. The sources also bring up Edgar Allan Poe's novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket.
How does Poe fit in?
Some people interpret the strange, ambiguous ending, set in the Antarctic, as hinting at a hollow Earth entrance or phenomenon. But Poe also loved hoaxes and unreliable narrators.
Right, so maybe reading too much into it.
It's ambiguous, but it adds to that literary backdrop where the idea has surfaced. Many other sci-fi and fantasy stories have played with the concept too, keeping it in the popular imagination.
Okay, so fiction keeps the idea alive. But what about real underground places? The sources mention places like Derinkuyu or Kubur Pedi. Do they lend any credibility?
They're fascinating examples of humans living underground, for sure. Derinkuyu in Turkey is an ancient underground city, likely built for protection. Kubur Pedi in Australia has homes built underground to escape the extreme heat. Wieliczka salt mine in Poland is another amazing subterranean complex.
But they aren't evidence of a naturally hollow planet.
Not at all. They show human ingenuity, adapting to specific environments or needs by digging down. They're localized, human-made structures. They don't support the idea of a vast, naturally occurring hollow space spanning the globe or containing hidden civilizations.
A completely different scale and origin.
Entirely.
Okay, so wrapping this up. We've traced the hollow Earth idea from myths like Agartha and early scientific guesses like Halley's, through the alleged Nazi connections and Admiral Byrd stories, right up to the strong scientific counter-arguments based on density, seismic waves, and geology.
Right. The narrative involves legends, misinterpretations, maybe some outright fabrication like the Byrd diaries seem to be, and a consistent lack of verifiable evidence, especially when compared to what science tells us about the Earth's structure.
But the idea itself, the myth, it clearly persists.
Oh, definitely. It holds a certain appeal, the undiscovered frontier, the hidden world. It continues to fuel stories and, well, conspiracy theories about governmental concealment.
Despite the scientific consensus being pretty solid that, well, we're living on a pretty solid planet.
Based on all the available evidence, yes. The Earth is dense and layered, not hollow.
Well, this has been a really thorough look at the different facets of the hollow Earth concealment hypothesis. A lot to think about. Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.